My, oh my, whatever will we talk about today? Hey, y'all, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza, and decision day has arrived for five-star linebacker Owen Pappoe, or Pappoe, I guess I'm supposed to say. You see that I've got my SEC Country shirt on. They're going to make me call this thing right down the middle on SEC Country tonight. I got to, be objective there on that show as Pappoe chooses between Auburn and Georgia, and a few other guys from Grayson choose, in some cases, SEC homes, and in a couple cases, maybe not. So we're going to have a good time on SEC Country later on. But for now, though, speaking to Georgia fans, I get to tell you what I really think, and despite a mountain of evidence to the contrary, I still think Pappoe chooses Georgia tonight. I'll tell you why as DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Oh my, it is a busy show for us today. We're glad you're with us. I'm going to dive right into it. Five-star linebacker Owen Pappoe from Grayson High School, one of the truly elite prospects of the class of 2019. Well, it is decision day for him tonight. Now, you know the backstory on this. For a while, it was supposed to be May the 5th. That's a Saturday. It's also a holiday, or at least, a celebrated holiday around the country known as Cinco de Mayo. A lot of Georgia fans have sort of changed that to make it Cinco de Pappoe, or Pappoe, leading into that on a Saturday. But Pappoe let us know not too long ago that it wasn't going to be May 5th anymore. He had a new decision date in mind, and that's what sort of leads us to where we are here today. Here is Pappoe from back at the Charlotte opening qualifier giving you that update on his recruiting timeline.
I know I was told everybody on Twitter is going to be May 5th, but I'm actually moving it to May 1st, so that's when I'm going to announce my commitment. And I really have an idea of who it's going to be. I'm going to make sure I visit two specific schools back-to-back. I ain't going to say who they are, but yeah, I'm going to make sure I visit them back-to-back, and I'm going to make my decision based off of them.
That is what Pappoe told DawgNation then. That day has arrived for us now, and we're all waiting with bated breath to find out, is it Georgia or is it Auburn for Pappoe? Now, I don't know when he says there are two other schools that he needs to visit, but I'm going to keep those secret. I don't know necessarily what he meant by that, because it could be one of two things. He had words are hard. He had official visits set up at Penn State, which he did go to on the day of G-Day, and Texas, which he went to this past weekend. Almost no one thinks he's going to either Texas or Penn State. So maybe those two schools are what he referenced when he said there are two more schools he needs to visit. Or maybe he meant something completely different, because I think the latest news here and the most sort of interesting development on this in the last 24 hours that I can tell is, as we head towards this May 1st decision date coming up later on tonight, which, by the way, you can watch on all the SEC Country video channels. I'll be anchoring that coverage and looking forward to having you a part of it with us this evening. Leading up to that, we find out that Ben Wolk at SEC Country has reported within the last 24 hours that there were some secret visits. Maybe secret's the wrong word here. How about unreported? Some unreported visits to Auburn for Owen Pappoe, which would lend some credence to why there's such a groundswell of momentum online, internet chatter, message board type stuff, that Pappoe is going to choose Auburn tonight. But last night on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, our buddy Hannah Chalker working with Jeff Sentell, Jeff also let us know on that show that there had been unreported, dare you say, secret visits to Georgia here over the last couple of weeks as well. So is that what Pappoe was referencing in that clip when he said there's a couple more schools I've got to visit? We may never know. The one thing that we do know, though, is that Auburn is indeed on the rise. Go to a message board, go on Twitter, go on whatever social medium you prefer. There is a lot of chatter, even from Georgia fans who are saying, whoa, right now it looks like Auburn's tough to beat for the five-star linebacker. A huge change over the last couple of weeks. At one point in time, it was seen as a virtual given, a virtual lock, that Pappoe would join the Georgia class. What is all of this about? Well, a couple of weeks ago here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, our guy in Auburn, Ben Wolk, who covers Auburn recruiting for SEC Country, tried to explain how Auburn's made the rise here.
He did visit Auburn February 3rd for their junior day, and that was when he left that was when he was saying that he needs to rearrange his top three because Auburn needs to be in there. And I've spoken with him subsequently, and he said, yeah, Auburn's really up there in that number 2 spot. I mean, Georgia still clearly is number 1 school. But what they preached to him was, one, Kevin Steele and Travis Williams like all their linebackers to know all 3 of their linebacker spots. I mean, you see it. They run so many 2 and 3 different linebacker sets that they like all 3 of their guys. I mean, they have 3 starters right now, really, Montavious Atkinson, or last year, Montavious Atkinson, Trey Williams, Deshaun Davis, and then really Darrell Williams as well, who will fill in that Trey Williams role this year. And all three of them did, all three different things at linebacker. The one thing that Travis Williams and Kevin Steele preached to Owen Pappoe at Junior Day was that they want to see more film of him at inside backer, sort of doing that Roquan Smith type of role.
So that sales pitch from Auburn made some Georgia fans as mad as fire. There were a lot of comments at the forum at forum.DawgNation.com of people saying, so you're telling me Auburn told Owen Pappoe, hey, come to Auburn so you can be the next Roquan Smith. Like, how do you do the math on that? Hey, you know what Roquan Smith did at Georgia? We want you to come to Auburn so you can do that here. Wouldn't it be easier to be the next Roquan Smith at Georgia than it would be to be at Auburn? I thought there were some pretty funny responses to that idea at the forum at forum.DawgNation.com. But the one thing that cannot be denied, Travis Williams, the Auburn linebacker coach, seems to have had some sort of impact on Pappoe here and has made a real big push either to the number 2 position or at least on May 1st, the number 1 position for Owen Pappoe. When Jeff Sentell spoke to Pappoe back a couple of weeks ago in Charlotte at the opening regional qualifier, Jeff asked Owen a great question. What was the Georgia response to the fact that we're hearing so much about Auburn on social media and on the internet? And here is Owen Pappoe's answer to that question.
Yeah, they like, what's all this talk about Auburn? I'm like, Coach, just let the media be the media. I just told them, if you don't hear something coming from me, just don't listen to it. That's what I told them.
If you don't hear something coming from me, you don't listen to it. Well, there is certainly plenty of whispers and innuendo out there that it's going to be bad news for Georgia tonight in an event that we'll cover live for you on the SEC Country video channels. This is despite the fact that Georgia has been a constant for Pappoe. As we played the audio from Jeff Sentell yesterday, it's the one thing that's not changed. It's been Nebraska, it's been Clemson, it's been Florida State, it's been a plethora of schools. But Georgia has always remained a constant. And even Owen Pappoe himself has admitted that, yeah, Georgia has been and maybe even still might be his top school.
I've said Georgia's my top school. They are. People say Auburn's coming in the picture. I mean, I guess so.
So what do you make of that? Georgia's my top school. Auburn's coming in the picture. That's what he says people are saying. But why aren't people saying that? Are they getting that from Owen Pappoe? You certainly seem to get the impression that somebody somewhere has got some sort of piece of inside information that makes them think that Pappoe is going to choose Auburn tonight. I'll get to in just a moment about where I think Owen's going, and maybe my thoughts here in terms of what the May 1st decision for him is going to be may fly in the face of what the sort of consistent common opinion's been on the internet. But before we get to that, though, let me at least say this. Some people on the outside looking in, and this thing tonight's going to get like mainstream TV coverage, like mainstream media folks will be paying attention to this. You know, if you listen or watch DawgNation Daily presented by Marcos Pizza every day, you kind of understand that, recruiting's the lifeblood of college football, that you can't win national championships if you don't win with recruits. Everybody who's sort of involved with this show sort of gets that. If you read Jeff Sentell's work, you sort of already understand that. There is a degree of sort of like mainstream attention sort of outside the periphery of all this that says, what's the big deal about a kid making a college announcement well before signing day when he may change his mind eventually anyway? The big deal here is that Pappoe really might be the next Roquan Smith. He really might be that talented. There's also a chance that he doesn't live up to that hype, but nothing's a given in life. Nothing is a sure thing. But typically, measurables speak for themselves. Specs speak for themselves. And Owen Pappoe at the event like the Nike Opening Qualifier proved once again a couple of weeks ago just how elite of a prospect he really is. Here is more of Owen describing some of the amazing stats he put up at that event.
What kind of scores did you get today?
40, 447, shuffle, 4 flat, 45 on the power ball, and then 40 vertical.
40 vertical. So what's your height and weight did you test?
Height, weight, 6 foot, 210.
Is there any specific score you want to get out of this?
I just want to get open. That's it.
So in other words, he just wants to be at the opening event later on this summer. He's obviously going to be there, and for 3 years in a row at events like this, he sort of tested off the charts. He is, in a lot of ways, a once-in-a-generation type interior linebacker prospect, and for either Georgia or Auburn tonight, there's a big reason why there's so much hype and attention paid towards him, which sort of leads me to my thought on this. And, I heard Jeff Sentell last night on Before the Hedges saying that, he's not in the crystal ball business, that as an objective journalist, he doesn't think that it's his, necessity to kind of go out there and make his predictions about, guys like Pappoe and where they're ultimately going to go. And I get where Jeff is coming from on that. I think that for me, though, I'm in the opinion business. On this show every day, I give opinions. And my opinion is, despite the fact that there is no shortage of information on the internet that suggests that Pappoe's going to choose Auburn here tonight, I still think he's going to choose Georgia. I do. And listen, obviously as the host of DawgNation Daily, I might have a motivation to tell Georgia fans what they want to hear. But the fact of the matter is I got to come back and do the show again tomorrow. So if I'm wrong today, I'm only going to have egg on my face tomorrow. And I very well might have egg on my face about this when it's all said and done tomorrow. And if I do, I'll sort of take my medicine on that. We'll kind of move on and talk about where Georgia goes from here. But there's just too much circumstantial evidence for me, despite the fact a lot of really smart experts, and I have got great respect for the people who cover recruiting for a living. That is not an easy job. That is a tough beat. And you got to try to make sense of a lot of different variables when it comes to this kind of stuff. And a lot of these experts, people that I respect, are telling you that Pappoe is going to go to Auburn. I just can't buy it. I can't buy it for a couple of reasons. A, momentum that would lead Pappoe to Auburn, why isn't that working on one of his Grayson teammates, Wanya Morris? Because Blake Morgan from SEC Country, who covers Tennessee, has got Morris going to Tennessee tonight. Ben Wolk, who covers Auburn for SEC Country, has Morris as a lean towards Tennessee. How could this momentum work for a 5-star linebacker but not work for a 4-star offensive lineman? That seems a little bit weird. Frankly, I think it seems a little bit weird that local TV coverage in Atlanta would break into local news to show a kid choose Auburn on television. I mean, I've worked in TV a little bit. That's just not the kind of thing that would typically happen here. It's only interesting to mainstream local news if Pappoe chooses Georgia. The TV nature of this announcement alone is enough for me to make me think that Pappoe is ultimately going to choose UGA. Also, Pappoe has told Jeff Sentell and others that one of the things that would make him sort of prolong his decision and look deeply at the school that he chooses is the idea that he wants to play with other dogs. And by dogs, he means, elite recruits. Well, we know that's going to be the case at Georgia. I mean, that's just a given and just a fact. Tresman Marshall from over the weekend, more proof of that. Even if Pappoe chooses Auburn, odds are Georgia's recruiting class at the end of the 2019 cycle still ranks ahead of Auburn's. So if that truly matters to Pappoe, it's Georgia that you choose and not Auburn. And you can take all this with a grain of salt. And listen, I've been wrong before. I've said a million times, my job here is to sort of be the voice of the fans, and I come at this show from the perspective of a fan. But I try to pay close attention to what's going on. And for me, there's too much circumstantial evidence right now that suggests Pappoe to Georgia and then remaining with Georgia throughout this entire process. So we'll see how it plays out. That's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. It should be an interesting night tonight, one way or another. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us. Of course, we're presented by Marco's Pizza, and glad to have Marco's a part of our program. And, of course, we try to make this show as easy for you to find as we possibly can on video. 3 different ways for you to watch the show on video. DawgNation Facebook, DawgNation YouTube, DawgNation Twitter. We stream live there each and every day. It's still amazing to me that we have 3 different video streams going at once. I don't know how to do any of that. I'm so thankful that Hannah and Michael are here to make sure it runs smoothly each and every day. I will point out one quick thing here. While we're talking about DawgNation Daily on video, remember tonight to watch the Pappoe decision. We're streaming that to the SEC Country channels, right? SEC Country Facebook, SEC Country YouTube, SEC Country Twitter. Now, a lot of you watch SEC Country live in the afternoons, so you're sort of already acquainted with those video channels. If you're not currently connected there, follow SEC Country on Facebook. Honestly, we think it's a lot of fun. The YouTube page works a lot like this one does, and SEC Country on Twitter is also a pretty good follow there as well. So that's the way to watch the Pappoe decision and the rest of the Grayson 4, as they're being called, later on this evening. Of course, on the radio at noon with our friends in Athens at Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rev and on podcast form, Apple Podcasts, Androids, what do you got? SoundCloud, world-famous DawgNation.com. We just want it to be as easy for you to find as it possibly can make it. By the way, as he said, Marco's Pizza brings the show to each and every day. True story, last night, wife got home late. I got home a little late. We were trying to figure out what to do for dinner. We said, hey, how about Marco's Pizza? Well, here's only one problem. My wife calls Marco's to order the pizza. I go pick it up. We don't really communicate that well. I go to the wrong Marco's. I get there, and they have no record of the order being made. But you know what they did? They said, sir, just sit down right here. Give us 10 or 15 minutes. We'll cook this order fresh for you. We'll get ready to go, and we'll have you out the door here in no time. And they took good care of me. I love Marco's because of that. When you go in the store, you call on the phone. It's always great service. And my family, we just love the Marco's Pizza. Huge smiles on both kids' faces last night as we had a little Marco's Pizza for dinner. And if you haven't tried it yet, let me make a suggestion. Try the boss of all cheese pizzas. They call it the Big Cheese, and for $10.99, you can get an extra large right now. But you got to act fast. It's for a limited time only. Marcos.com for more information on that. All right, I gave you my opinion a moment ago about Owen Pappoe. That's probably about as worth as much as you paid for it, which is nothing. Later on, we'll get some expert opinion from Jeff Sentell, some analysis from Jeff on that, as we do each and every Tuesday. Before we welcome in Jeff to the program, though, let me go away from recruiting and Owen Pappoe for a moment, because some pretty cool sound here from former Georgia running back Nick Chubb, second-round draft pick of the Cleveland Browns, and pretty unique way in which he was welcomed into the NFL. The great former Cleveland Browns running back Jim Brown was there to announce the pick of Nick Chubb. How did Chubb feel about that, and what does he feel about getting his NFL career started? Well, here's what he told reporters on draft night.
Yeah, it's a blessing. Jim Brown, I remember just hearing about him and watching his highlights, things like that. And it's a blessing to just have him, call my name at the draft. Man, I'm lost for words. I don't know what to say. I'm excited. I'm proud to be a part of your organization. Can't wait to get out there and just play football and get to know everybody. They know my teammates, coaches, get this thing rolling.
Have there ever been two more different people than – now, I don't know much about the Ohio State cornerback they took 4th overall, but first overall, the Browns take Baker Mayfield, who is a drama farm if there ever was one, totally cultivating attention every single moment. Nick Chubb, who I think he's used the phrase, I'm at a loss for words, like 9 million times in media availabilities before, totally content to go unnoticed and just go about his business in a very professional way. I think that Chubb's going to do big things there in Cleveland, and you know what? I guess I'm going to be rooting for the Cleveland Browns here a little bit, because I like Nick Chubb a lot, and I love his NFL future there with the Cleveland Browns. So congratulations to him and all the former Georgia players, both drafted and undrafted free agents, as they begin their NFL careers. Let's get back to recruiting now. It's time for our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. Let's get all the latest skinny on Owen Pappoe with Jeff Sentell. Good to have you with us here on the program today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we do begin our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All with Jeff Sentell on this Tuesday. And don't forget, you hear us talk about Marlowe's all the time. If you live in the Atlanta area, or really a lot of places around the South, if you want to find out more about the Marlowe's closest to you, if you've never tried one, let me invite you to do so. And the best way to do that is becoming a Marlowe's insider. Simply text the word Marlowe's. That's M-A-R-L-O-W-S. No apostrophe, just M-A-R-L-O-W-S to 24242, and you can become a Marlowe's insider today. Jeff Sentell, good morning. Glad you're with us. I'm sure you can guess what we're going to talk a lot about today.
The shrimp and crab nachos at Marlowe's Tavern.
We will talk some about that for sure, because I'm a big fan of that. But something else I'm also a big fan of is 5-star linebacker Owen Pappoe. And I said this a moment ago. In your role as a reporter, you don't love giving the crystal ball stuff, which I have great respect for. You have to keep it objective. You have to sort of, call it right down the middle. For me, I do give opinions for a living. And while I won't ask you to go on the record with your opinion necessarily, I will, I guess, give you a chance to respond to mine. There is just an onslaught of online chatter that has Pappoe going to Auburn tonight when he makes his decision, an event we'll cover live here in SEC country. For me, this feels like a smokescreen, and I still say Pappoe is all dog. How do you respond?
Well, Brandon, were you also a guy that was saying Demetrius Robertson was all dog until the very end? Were you also a guy that was claiming against all odds that insert favorite recruit here, I guess, way back in the day, were you thinking Trey Blackman was all dog? Were you thinking Rashaan Evans was all dog?
Sure, fair enough. I certainly have been wrong before. There's no doubt about that. Intuition sometimes can fail you. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, you hit on one of the things I was hoping we would bring up in this discussion today, Brandon, because it's like I wondered. You follow recruiting from the fan perspective. You devour a lot of the content and have for some time. And either it's one of two things. Well, this is a true shift late for Owen Pappoe to Auburn, or this is one of the more artfully crafted smoke screens, hocus-pocus, sleights of hand, kind of like Penn and Teller-worthy type illusions leading into a 5-stars decision. You got to admit, either way this thing's going to go. If it does go back to the DawgNation Daily side, then everybody will scratch their heads and say, "Oh, you got me, Owen." But then if it does go to the Jordan Hare side, the War Eagle, the Tiger side, then everyone will start thinking about, well, why did we get so worked up about this prospect in the first place? And they'll rattle off names like Quay Walker and Channing Tindall and Monty Rice. And they'll think, well, Georgia will be just fine. The reality is it's a little bit of that, but think Owen Pappoe is a prospect that shows how well the state of Georgia recruits its own state. I think other prospects will kind of take notice. I don't really trade a whole lot of stock in the theory that Owen Pappoe's decision would suddenly make the decision a whole lot easier for guys like Warren Burrell, Kobe Wooden, Andrew Booth, Trevon Walker, guys like that. I just think he's a very special player who maybe sees things that he likes in both universities, but maybe he sees a greater opportunity in one particular university. And I've written a lot about it. I could have went overboard writing about this stuff, but I kind of tried to maybe somewhat stay net neutral with a lot of this stuff. I'll share one reason why I think Georgia still has a great shot at Owen Pappoe, and that is just what they're doing. Everybody uses the Roquan Smith comparison. Well, Roquan Smith is now about 6 feet 1 inch and about 235 pounds. Owen is only about 6 feet and a half, 210 pounds. But oddly enough, Roquan was right about that size when he left Macon County on the way to UCLA and then Georgia. So there are similarities. Highly intelligent, very fast, sideline to sideline. And there'd be the opportunity to play with a lot of guys. There would be a lot of guys in front of him that could keep him clean from the defensive tackle spot. And then you have things at Auburn where he would be the guy at Auburn. He would be a marquee recruit, a bellwether, bell cow recruit. Conversely, Georgia already has 3 of those guys that have been committed to the program for at least 9 months. And the other thing with Owen Pappoe, I think maybe should be said a lot, and we'll hear Owen's reasoning a little bit later on down the road, is Owen, there's one thing that Auburn offers that maybe Georgia cannot, and that's just the ability to get a little bit away from home and have that different world experience.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point to bring up for why he might choose Auburn. Other than seeing my favorite team get good players, my favorite thing about sort of following recruiting, and now in this role somewhat getting to cover recruiting, but certainly following it as a fan closely, is the way a lot of these things sort of fit together like a puzzle, or you're sort of the analogy guy, but I'll borrow that for a moment and say it's almost like an algebraic equation. You're sort of just trying to solve for X on some of this kind of stuff for a while, and, you know, when you look at Owen here, maybe momentum to Auburn, it doesn't seem to make sense to me, though, that for Wanya Morris, there doesn't seem to be that same momentum for Auburn. You know, Blake Morgan, who covers Tennessee recruiting for SEC Country, is in his latest notebook is sort of, pegging Morris to go to Tennessee. Ben Wolk, who covers Auburn recruiting for SEC Country, to his Auburn readers, is sort of suggesting that Morris may be more of a Tennessee lean here. So one of the reasons I have a hard time buying this gravitational pull to Auburn is that it's working with a 5-star linebacker but not working with a 4-star offensive lineman. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Well, and there are a few things. If everybody will look at the momentum that Auburn's trying to create, they had Ja'Kai Clark, an Auburn teammate. But they also, everybody's, I think, paid attention to what Owen told us about, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe 12 days ago, when he said that he wants to play with some dogs. Well, if you see what Auburn has kind of reeled in over the last couple of days, you have 2 prize prospects out of South Georgia. You've got, I think, Jashawn Sheffield's announcement dropped. You've got Jalen Simpson's announcement dropping. Those 2 guys were leans to Auburn. You have a lot of Auburn Tiger type players that are kind of setting up the momentum and the boost for a big announcement. And it's something with Owen where, man, can really play. But Brandon, let me do something with you. I want. Let's have a user, Brandon, fan, viewer experience right here.
All right.
If I could give you the trade-off in your own personal hierarchy of players, does Owen Pappoe rate higher than Andrew Booth?
Probably not. No, because I do have. If I'm Georgia, I've got inside linebackers. I don't have an Andrew Booth, but that doesn't mean that I don't really want Pappoe. But Booth probably does rank a tick higher for me.
Trevon Walker or Owen Pappoe?
Walker still ranks a tick higher. This is a guy that he just threw one of those field events. He just dominated one of these field events recently. He's blocking shots on the basketball floor. That's a pretty diverse array of athleticism for Trevon Walker. He's slightly higher on my board here than Pappoe, but that doesn't mean I don't really want Pappoe, though, if I'm Georgia.
I know, Brandon. Those are just 2 examples.
But Walker and Booth I do have on my sort of wish list. I have Walker and Booth higher. But, I'm emphatic about this. Just having Channing Tindall and just having Quay Walker and just having Tresmond Marshall, who I love, by the way, just having these guys alone is not enough for me to say, well, that's okay if Georgia doesn't get Pappoe, because you really need 4 guys, and of that 4, hopefully one of them emerges as a future Butkus Award winner. And that's kind of the way the ratio and this kind of stuff works from time to time.
Yeah, I'll counsel a couple things there. Number one, you need to probably slip in the name Monty Rice in there as well, because Monty Rice is going to have at least 2 more years at the University of Georgia. You're going to need to probably slip in J.D. Bertrand there as well, Eagle Scout linebacker, still rated as an outside linebacker, but is going to play inside at the University of Georgia. Another big guy, really tough guy, also pretty speedy for his position, harassed Trevor Lawrence in the state playoffs last year when Blessed Trinity went up against Cartersville. And you also got to think about, I guess kind of the whole universal way of looking at things when you wonder about that Roquan Smith position, and can they ever really get another Roquan Smith? Can they get the next insert name here? I think Georgia would just be happy with an all-SEC level, all-American type level linebacker from one of those 4 or 5 names. And Brandon, there's going to be a name, I guarantee you this, there'll be a name 2 years from now that you will have your sleeves rolled up just as highly as you do right now for Owen Pappoe, because that's just the nature of the beast and the way Georgia recruits right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's always going to be a next guy, which is what makes what we do for a living so much fun, frankly. Part of your role when you come here for the Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All on Tuesday, and by the way, we appreciate Marlowe's being a part of DawgNation Daily here, is to sort of throw water on some of the the flames that get burning online. And one of those, if you go to forum.dawgnation.com, there is a lot of concern about Pappoe's recent switch to the Under Armour All-America game. Obviously, people draw the connection of, he likes Under Armour. Auburn's an Under Armour school. He wants to wear that on Saturdays. Maybe Pappoe chooses Auburn, maybe he doesn't. But are there any tea leaves to be read about an Under Armour All-American game for an Under Armour school like Auburn?
Brandon, I'm going to say I'm not going to really. This isn't AAU basketball yet. I'm just going to use a great Alabama-ish Yellowhammer State example from someone who lived in the state for 8 years before coming back to Georgia. You could give, I think it's still a Selma Montgomery area company. If you all of a sudden, Russell Athletic just pulled off the biggest coup since the Louisiana Purchase, and they traded the Georgia Tech account for the Alabama account. I don't think anyone in the world will sit there and discount what Alabama is doing because they're wearing Russell Athletic gear and no longer Nike or whatever. I think the Under Armour thing there, lots of people associate somehow right now associate Adidas with Georgia because there's a lot of guys that went to the previous incarnation of the Army All-American game, and they're affiliated with Adidas, even though they would go on to Georgia and play for a Nike school. I don't think sneaker wars and gear wars and swag wars have invaded major college football yet, at least not to the point that's happening in basketball. Owen is a guy that, if I just put myself in his head for a second, he has been offered and peppered and mailbox buckled type stuff with mail probably since September of 2015. He's probably been heavily recruited, kind of like D'Angelo Gibbs was, as a major recruit every time he steps foot on campus since the end of his freshman season at Grayson. And there might be a point here where this guy is just ready to get it over with, ready to commit, and then ready to just start thinking about other things. If you'll notice, you see a great, and I think a very sound, secure the bags type strategy that's happening at Grayson High School. They have 8 guys already committed out of their 2019 class right now. And when they add the Grayson 4 on tonight, on May the 1st from Sports and Social, that number will rise to 12 seniors committed to major universities. I think all of them are major universities, at least Middle Tennessee level and above, before their spring practice begins. And that's a great way to do 2 things. One, secure futures, protect these recruits against injury that might happen in spring practice or in summer camps or summer off-season workouts. Everybody remembers the stories of last year at the opening. I believe there was a Tennessee commitment there that broke his leg in a kind of freak accident or whatever. they secure all their futures by committing right now before the start of their senior seasons, and they also can place the focus on, rightfully so, Grayson chasing a state championship.
Yeah, that's two good ideas. It's a great combination. And speaking of great combinations, brunch is a great combination as well. It's breakfast and lunch, and you can fall in love with Sunday brunch right now at Marlowe's Tavern. It's available every Sunday at select Marlowe's locations. Visit marlowstavern.com for brunch locations and time. All right, let me get back to sort of more of a serious thing on this. We played some audio from your interview with Owen Pappoe from a couple of weeks ago where he talked about he still needed to take 2 more visits before he made his decision. And I said on the show, Jeff, I don't know by those 2 visits if he means the officials he took to Penn State, which no one thinks he's going there, or the recent official he took to Texas, which, once again, no one thinks he's going there. But there's also been, as you talked about last night on Before the Hedges with Hannah Chalker, that he'd been taking some unreported visits to Georgia. Ben Wolk at SEC Country has also got some reports of some unreported visits to Auburn. How significant are these unreported visits for Pappoe, and are they as numerous for Georgia as they are for Auburn?
Full context to that question. I can't believe we haven't really dialed that one in earlier, but it's a good question. The full context to that question is he was going to take his officials, and we were discussing whether Georgia or Auburn would get an official visit. He said he was going to take 3 in the spring and save 2 for the fall. He did not plan to take an official to either Georgia or Auburn because they're so close, and he's been to those locales so much that he told me in the reference to that conversation, my takeaway in the context of that conversation is he needed to take 1 more additional visit to Georgia and Auburn. This was back on April the 25th, I believe. 1 more additional visit to Georgia and Auburn before he would make his final decision known on May the 1st.
So one last thing for me, Jeff, and if you don't mind, I don't want to give Tresman Marshall short shrift because he is such a big addition to the Georgia class. So if you'll come back with us on Friday, we'll talk a lot more about Tresman Marshall then, because I really want to kind of dive in, sort of fully into what he is as a UGA commit, and I don't want that to get swallowed up by what we're doing on Pappoe today. That's big news for Georgia. I want to get your thoughts on Marshall. We'll do that more on Friday. Let me just finish up with this final point on Pappoe here, though, and I'm going to go back to the forum here for a moment. Teddy, speaking at forum.dawgnation.com, a poster there, was reminding UGA fans that if Pappoe does choose Auburn tonight, now this flies in the face of kind of what you just said, but I still think there's a lot of online chatter that, Georgia could still be in it before it's done. In December, sometime around then, could still reemerge for a Pappoe. I think you would join me in saying then it would behoove Georgia fans to behave themselves on social media. That's good advice, I think, every day of the week in terms of, how you relate to each other and certainly how you relate to high school kids. But, Jeff, my hope is, along with what Teddy said at the forum at forum.dawgnation.com, we'll see very well-behaved, well-mannered Georgia fans in terms of how they talk about this and every recruiting story on social media, because recruits are, after all, watching. I think you'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, and, Brandon, that point right there is a great one. And I think there's even a board online on our message board forum which dictates the correct course of action or the best practices action tree model for what fans should probably do after a decision when in reference to kind of tweeting about recruits. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm also glad that we're going to take the right time to discuss Tresman Marshall and also probably Broderick Big Silly Jones as well, because those are 2 huge commitments for Georgia over the last week. I think Broderick Jones compares very favorably in my mind to where Andrew Thomas was a couple of years ago. Maybe he's not going to have access to that high-level training that Andrew Thomas gets at Pace Academy. But, you're looking at a future 5-star there. He's a 5-star walking. And also Marshall. But with reference to Pappoe and what's going to happen here, and a lot of people want to paint this as kind of an Adam Anderson situation or a Brenton Cox situation of a year ago, and look where certain things are and where things finished with the Georgia staff and how well they close out recruits. I just feel that no 2 recruiting situations are the same. Kind of like a good caddy on the golf course that can kind of read putts for somebody that needs to get hot with their putter to make some birdies. I would just say that even with like golf course lives, the right speed or the different speed can cause the line to change, and I just don't think you can cookie cutter the same thing with Brenton Cox and Adam Anderson and Georgia's closing potential and apply it to Owen Pappoe. I'm just going to just going to kind of read the green here as the way I see it. Might be different in somebody else's eyes. But I'm going to be surprised if whatever decision Owen Pappoe makes tonight, if he deviates from that in the long run, unless there's some major seismic news events like Travis Williams becoming the head coach somewhere in the Sun Belt or, a Central Florida type school or something like that. I think if a lot of the supporting characters of this decision remain the same, I think that I'm going to look at Owen Pappoe's decision tonight with a pretty accelerated or enhanced sense of finality.
Well, that's a really interesting way to close out our Marlowe's Tavern tell-off for this Tuesday, Jeff. Your coverage of this stuff is always top-notch. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today, one way or another. I can't wait to read every word that you write about this in your Sentell Intel and all the other pieces at DawgNation.com, and we know you're going to be all over it. Thanks for your time here today, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Take it easy, Brandon. Everybody have a good show.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So it's that last line from Jeff, and listen, you got to understand something. I don't ever want to put Jeff Sentell in a bad situation about any of this kind of stuff, so you would be surprised how little sometimes he and I talk about some of this kind of stuff off the air. I don't want to know anything that I can't tell y'all. And sometimes that means I need to sort of quarantine myself off from other people who may know more than they're capable of revealing. Does Jeff know more about Owen Pappoe than he's revealing on air right now? I don't know. We haven't talked about it. And, it's sort of my job to let him be a reporter, and it's my job to be able to make sure that everything that comes into my ears, into my head, I'm able to sort of speak out to y'all, because ultimately y'all are the constituency that I'm trying to serve. But if I'm reading tea leaves here, if I'm reading evidence, what Jeff's just said there at the end is another reason why, if I had to lean a direction, I'm leaning Georgia for Pappoe. And I could be wrong, and if I am, on Wednesday, heavens knows I'll be hearing it from the Auburn people. They're just going to be, annihilating my Twitter feed to say whatever they want to say. And frankly, I don't care. They can say what they want. Even some Georgia fans are going to be mad at me for steering them in the wrong direction. I'll take my medicine on this tomorrow if I'm wrong. But if what Jeff Sentell is saying is true, that the recruitment ends tonight, then Pappoe's going to Georgia. I don't see how it's anything other than that. But as I said, I have been wrong before. We'll play this out and see how it goes. By the way, coming up in about 3 minutes, if you're watching on video, I do want to get your predictions. And you can put them in the DawgNation Facebook page, the DawgNation YouTube page, DawgNation Twitter page. We'll take as many comments as we can here. We'll kind of fly through these. Your thoughts on where Pappoe lands tonight. Is it Georgia? Is it Auburn? A lot of Georgia fans online have been even saying, hey, the bad guys may win this one. I'm curious what DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers say. I'll let you weigh in on that in a moment. By the way, if you're listening to the show, if you're a podcast listener, radio listener, you want your chance to react as well, hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. I'll take your thoughts on that too. For now, though, let's do our SEC through. I'll remind you, SEC Country Live, 3 p.m. this afternoon, SEC Country Facebook, YouTube, Twitter page, and then, of course, those SEC video channels, also the place to watch the Grayson 4 make their announcement tonight. Now, we say Grayson 4, Georgia only in the mix for Pappoe. There are 3 other guys making their decision. One of those guys I talked to with Jeff a moment ago, that's Wanya Morris, not the former Boys to Men singer, by the way, just the lineman here from Grayson. Pretty good prospect. Georgia never really in the mix for Morris, though. He's choosing between Tennessee tonight and Auburn. And the smart money seems to be a Tennessee lean here, which just makes it weird that, somehow Auburn's going to have better pull with elite top 10 player in the state of Georgia, 5-star linebacker, than it is with Morris, who's a player right now that, for whatever reason, is not really aligning in Georgia's recruiting orbit right here. That just doesn't make much sense to me. I do think this is a crucial recruiting battle for Jeremy Pruitt. I think that despite the fact that Auburn's taking graduate transfer offensive linemen right now, I think that Pruitt needs this more than Auburn does. I think that Jeremy Pruitt just needs some sort of recruiting win. We'll see if he gets that with Wanya Morris. Kenyatta Watson, I guess the thought here on Watson, another one of these Grayson guys that's going tonight, he was on that visit to Texas with Pappoe over the weekend. Pappoe not going to go to Texas. Kenyatta Watson might, though. It seems like there's a lot of online predictions that have Watson, the safety, ending up at Texas, so we'll see if that actually works out for him there. And then the Kevin Harris story is a pretty interesting one. At one point in time, Harris seemed close to Georgia. Then that kind of dissolved. And other schools kind of got in the mix here. Alabama is apparently very serious about Kevin Harris, and I guess that's ultimately where I think he probably lands. Harris, the linebacker, choosing Alabama tonight. Does seem like the Miami's made a big push here, and maybe the same way that all three of these guys, at least what we care about from the SEC standpoint, all have that sort of either this school or that school choice. For Morris, it's Tennessee or Auburn. For Pappoe, it's Auburn or Tennessee. For Kevin Harris, it seems like the AB choice here is either Alabama or Miami. LSU is in the mix. Chris Kirshner from SEC Country, though, is reporting that LSU a distant third in this pursuit. Looks like Harris, the one-time, I don't even know what you call, target of interest for Georgia, looks like he's going to go to Alabama here. And doesn't really seem like Georgia has been in the mix on Harris for quite some time, but maybe Alabama over Miami for Harris tonight, although some people do take this Miami push as pretty serious. It's the Grayson 4 tonight on the SEC Country video channels. I will also say that back to the field, on the field for 2018, BetDSI has updated its national championship odds for 2018. I'll scroll through a couple of these kind of quick here, and then I'm going to get your predictions about Pappoe tonight. Alabama just a little bit more than 2-1 to win the national championship right now. That's an amazing number given the fact that they just lost 12 guys drafted to the NFL. Georgia's at 10-1 right now, which is actually kind of an interesting odd for Georgia. That's actually probably not a bad deal for Georgia right now. I don't know that the Dogs win the national championship, but 10-1's not bad. You got Auburn at 25-1, LSU at 30-1, A&M around 60-1, Florida at 70-1. It could be 10 million to 1. Florida would be a terrible bet there. Mississippi State about 110-1. Arkansas about 150-1. South Carolina 250-1. That seems pretty wild. Same odds as Tennessee at both 250-1. That seems pretty ridiculous. I think South Carolina should be better than that, although probably not a national championship winner. We'll make that your SEC through. And as promised, we try to make DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, as interactive as we can make it. On video every day, you should know, for those of you that listen to the show, we have an entire section after the official broadcast ends where we do nothing but take comments. It's always a lot of fun. But on a day like this, I think hearing from more than just me is appropriate. We had a chance to hear from Jeff Sentell earlier as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, and I want to hear from some of y'all on the Pappoe situation. Let me go over here to Facebook first, and then we'll hit a couple of the YouTube deals and some of that kind of stuff. Billy Cloud asked on Facebook, will we be on DawgNation tonight at 5:30 for Pappoe? That's a great question, Billy. Thanks for asking. We're going to be on the SEC Country video channel. So if you've ever watched SEC Country Live before, the same place you watch that is the same place you can see the Pappoe announcement. SEC Country on Facebook, SEC Country on YouTube, SEC Country on Twitter. Stacy Goebel says, BA, right or wrong, you always have your listeners' best interests at heart. Go Dogs. Stacy, I appreciate you saying that. I do appreciate you saying that, because that is what I'm trying to do here. I want to tell you what I think. I want to serve y'all as well as I can, and that means giving you my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is Pappoe chooses Georgia tonight. And if I'm wrong, well, goodness knows, that's happened before, and I'll come back tomorrow and take my medicine. Erica Allen says he's going to Auburn. Matt Silvers on Facebook says, I think Pappoe comes to Athens. And to go back to Erica's point, the reason why this is such a relevant, important conversation here today is because so many people are saying he's going to Auburn. And as I said to start our broadcast here today, a lot of the people who are saying that are like smart, expert people that I trust, people that whose opinions I value. Some of them friends, some of them just colleagues, but there are a lot of smart people who say Pappoe to Auburn. I have no disrespect whatsoever for the people who are saying that. They're saying that for a reason. I think the rumors of Pappoe to Auburn are coming from somewhere. And as a reporter, your job is to report what you're hearing. That's the only job you can do. There's not a lot of room for sort of, ciphering, what of this is smokescreen, what of it's not. But for those of us in the opinion business, we can sort of call it, the way we see it, and I'm calling this a smokescreen. Eric Moody says it only matters where he signs. Eric, I would kind of agree with you on that typically, but it is worth pointing out that Jeff Sentell says that he thinks it ends tonight. So I'm going to take Jeff pretty seriously on that one way or another, that if Jeff is saying that he thinks it would take a huge, momentum swing to sway him away from the decision he makes tonight, that's kind of flying in the face of what some of the other folks in this industry are saying. And believe it or not, there are some other people who do this for a living. There are, some people who say this thing goes all the way to December. Jeff just said on our interview a moment ago, maybe not. So more reason to take it seriously this evening. Dapper Dan says on YouTube, I don't think I'm watching this tonight. Another 4-hour ceremony is coming where fans will be acting crazy online. I'll just be as satisfied as finding out later. I don't think it's going to be that drawn out tonight, Dapper. Remember, this is not signing day here. This is sort of a get in, get out scenario. Now, it is worth pointing out that the Grayson Four, so to speak, will start their announcement somewhere around 5:30. Pappoe's won't come until after that. So we're saying 5:30 for everybody around SEC country, but for a Georgia fan, it's probably a little later than that, realistically speaking. But this is not some drawn-out ceremony here, I don't think. Let me get a couple more here while we have time on YouTube here as well. Jacob Mahaffey says, I'm feeling like he could go to Auburn tonight. If he wants to play with some dogs, though, he'll end up at UGA. Georgia's class will no doubt be better than Auburn's. And, Jacob, I think that's well said. And that's ultimately why I think he chooses Georgia. I mean, listen, weird stuff does occasionally happen in recruiting. Monty Rice briefly committed to LSU, strangely enough, before ultimately landing at UGA. You know, a lot of people have talked about where Adam Anderson was this time a year ago, where Brenton Cox was this time a year ago. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff out there in the world of recruiting. There's no doubt about that. But I think this is a different brand of UGA recruiting. There's a behemoth that's been built up since the on-field performance of 2017 and the recruiting class of 2018. I don't think this year is like that last year. You can point to all these committed guys, committed elsewhere guys, that ultimately landed in Georgia's class, but this 2019 class is just going to have a lot more consistent momentum. I believe that consistent momentum continues with Pappoe tonight. We will see if I'm wrong. One way or another, as Eddie wants to remind you, 179 days from now, Georgia goes back to Florida and gets another win over the Florida Gators. This is our Gator Countdown here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. We appreciate you being here and appreciate you doing that with us each and every day. I'll also say that been a little bit of interesting online chatter about Tramel Walthor as of late. There's the 24/7 report that maybe he's taking a gray shirt. Maybe now some movement the other direction. We'll cover that story for you, too, and see you tomorrow. And on video now, we have time to take a lot more comments. I tried to go a little shorter today with the full broadcast so we could have more time for you to kind of get into everything you want to get. Chris Lamb says Auburn can't develop inside linebackers. There are two things that Auburn has not had a lot of as of late. It's been, and I want to say Ben Wolk wrote about this. One of y'all may find this quicker than I can. How long it's been since Auburn had a 5-star guy. I mean, it's been a minute now for Auburn getting a 5-star guy. Haven't done that in a while. And conversely, haven't had a lot of elite draft picks. Jeff Holland doesn't even get drafted at all, for instance. You know, you got Georgia guys making tons of money at the next level. You know, the Roquans, the Jordan Jenkins, the Leonard Floyds. I mean, you got these guys making big-time bucks at the NFL level. You know, who are the Auburn linebackers making that money? Where are they in the NFL right now? Now, this NFL stuff, you know, I don't know that it always means as much as sometimes we want to pretend it means. It's a better narrative than it is an actual fact sometimes, I think. I think relationships matter more than anything else, and maybe Pappoe's just got a great relationship with Travis Williams. Maybe Travis Williams is just the best guy in the whole world. Maybe he's just the friendliest person you've ever met in your life. This all just seems too good to be true from an Auburn standpoint. Always seems to be too good to be true. Jacob Mahaffey has a good point on YouTube. I hadn't thought about this. He says, if Owen Pappoe really is the next Roquan Smith, then he's got to commit to some other school first. He's got to have the gloves on showing UCLA like Roquan did or somebody else, and then sort of dramatically come back to Georgia after that. That's pretty well said. Pretty well said. Arlen Block says, if Walthour gray shirts, does that mean Gibbs scholarship is still good? And vice versa. If Walthour enrolls this summer, who leaves in order to get our numbers in order? That's a great question. We're obviously going to follow that closely. All I know for sure is, and we talked about this yesterday, is that Georgia's going to find the best 85. And if that means, Jay Hayes in and maybe somebody else, delaying, that's just what Georgia's going to do, because obviously you're going to favor the experienced defensive lineman over an inexperienced defensive lineman. I don't mean to be cold and callous, but that's just a fact. As far as like the salary cap management of the scholarships, math has never been my strong suit, but I think that D'Angelo Gibbs coming back is going to be a part of this team. I think he contributes this year. I think that Jay Hayes is going to be on the field playing at least a good bit for Georgia, if not, a significant role on the defensive line. And once you add those guys in, you'll see where you're left over with everybody else. But we're going to keep following it for sure. But like we said, there's kind of conflicting online reports about this. You had the initial 24/7 Sports report saying that he is gray shirting. I believe Seth had that he's not. So we'll see, or at least maybe not yet. I didn't see the story, but we'll see where that all plays itself out. Alan Vrabanchik says that I just said there were some changes to his gray shirt. It should be pointed out that I have nothing to report. All I do is react to the other reports. 24/7 says looks like he's going to gray shirt. The Athletic is saying maybe not. So we will see. We will see. Jordan Perry over on Facebook says, I think Travis Williams is the biggest pull to Auburn for Owen. He's been recruited long enough to know that you should commit to a school and not a coach. That's why I believe he winds up at UGA. Yeah, Jordan, I understand where you're kind of coming from on that, but it would be hypocritical for me to make that argument because I'm the guy on this show every single day flag waving for Sam Pittman and Glenn Schumann and all these other guys who are doing exactly what Travis Williams is trying to do. That it is a little bit of a company line to say, hey, you commit to the school, not the coach. We know deep down that's not the way things go. I mean, would you still want to live in a certain state if your significant other, your wife, girlfriend wasn't there with you? Would you want to work at a company if you didn't know any of the people that you were working with? You know, that's sort of the same thing as, hey, you commit to this school and don't worry about who your coach is going to be. That's just not really the way that life works. I mean, you know, I say over and over again that there is nothing that impacts recruiting more than relationships. It's not about who's running back university, or it's not about who has the coolest social media edits. All of that is just mirage, I think, anyway. This stuff comes down to relationships. The best salespeople are always the people who sort of cultivate the most authentic relationships with the people they're reaching to. And college football coaches are salesmen. I mean, that's just what they are. And the ones that sort of do it the most organically, the most authentically, are the ones that are going to do the best. Travis Williams may be as good at this as Glenn Schumann and these guys for Georgia are. I sort of doubt it, but he might be. But it's those really, you know, good position coaches that have given Georgia the edge that it has in recruiting right now, and obviously Auburn's trying to do some of the same stuff here. Steve Self says, if Pappoe goes to Auburn, and I think he is, he will finish no better than third in the SEC the next 4 years. Georgia's going to play Bama for the SEC championship game going forward, Dogs in the national championship run every year. Steve, it is true. And listen, this is not sour grapes, but Auburn does not have a lot of stuff going for it right now in comparison to Alabama and Georgia. Who, for those of you that follow recruiting closely, who has Auburn gotten that Alabama wanted? When was the last time that Auburn was trotting out a recruit that Alabama said, boy, we would really like to have had that guy? I mean, Byron Cowart, 2015. I mean, when was the last time Auburn really won some major league recruiting battle? And, you know, for 2018 in Georgia, you know, the kids that Auburn got from Georgia, I mean, you know, I think a couple of these guys may end up being pretty good players. Smoke Monday and the receiver from Brookwood, that they may end up being pretty good players. But it's worth pointing out that they got them because Georgia was busy recruiting other guys. And maybe it ends up being a talent evaluation miss on Georgia's part because, like I said, I think both these guys, I think Hill is the receiver's name from Brookwood and Monday is the safety. They're both pretty good players. Look like they are pretty interesting prospects. But, you know, Georgia and Auburn did not go head-to-head with many guys in 2018 where Auburn had any chance of getting that prospect. All of a sudden, that's just magically different for Owen Pappoe. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, Marcavius Big Cat Bryant was a long time ago now. That was a lot of water has sort of sailed under the bridge since then. So it's just too much for me to overcome here. And I think that Steve's exactly right. You know, if you watch SEC Country, for those of you that watch pro wrestling, one of the things I say a lot on there is Auburn's a really good team. I think they may be third best in the SEC this year, which is good enough for like top 10 in the country maybe. But what Auburn really is like, for those of you that watch pro wrestling, they're like the intercontinental champion of the SEC. You know, they're not the main event. Georgia and Alabama are the main event. They're sort of like the champion of the mid-card. I mean, they're way better than everybody else. There's not a single team in the SEC East other than Georgia that can come within 2 touchdowns of Auburn. Florida would get, you know, they're not playing this year, but Florida would get just, you know, pantsed by Auburn. Tennessee would too. I think Auburn's even better than South Carolina. I think Auburn's better than LSU. I think Auburn, for at least another year, is better than Texas A&M, better than even Mississippi State, who's getting some hype. They're way better than everybody else, but they're not in the main event. That's Georgia and Alabama. They're sort of like the intercontinental champion. Why would Owen Pappoe want to play for the mid-card? And that's not me being sour grapes. If he chooses Auburn, I'm going to wish him well and hope he enjoys his buddy Travis Williams. But at face value for now, something about that just doesn't quite add up. Let me get a few more comments here. On a different subject, Billy Cloud says, what are the chances that Tyson Campbell plays as a freshman? I think they're pretty high. I think that Georgia needs him to, first of all. I think that if we're in third week in September, wherever that gets us, week after the South Carolina game, that's a pretty good barometer here. If by the week after South Carolina, if we're not talking about Tyson Campbell making some sort of impact for Georgia's secondary, I think we're all going to be pretty disappointed here. And I think that I'm going to have to be forced to talk about that as bad news. And that's a lot of pressure on Campbell because quarterback's a hard position to play as a freshman. There are not a lot of really good freshmen. You occasionally have a Vernon Hargrave, someone like that really comes in and plays super well as a freshman. That's a pretty tough spot for a freshman, a pretty underrated cerebral position. But Georgia needs him, and the best I can tell, Campbell's got the athleticism and the the wherewithal. He's a true cornerback. This is not one of these hybrid safety / corners. This is not some athlete converted to play cornerback. This is a built in a factory, ready to go cornerback here, and I think he's going to do well for Georgia. And the Dogs, I think, definitely need for him to. Michael Morrow says, no matter what happens tonight, Pappoe will be a Dog in December. I agree with Michael on that, which is all the more reason why I think he chooses Georgia tonight. But I think that on December the 20 whatever, when we're doing a DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, by the way, we're going to be talking about Pappoe as a part of this 2019 class, I think. So the odds of us talking about Pappoe to Auburn tomorrow just don't really seem to make all that much sense. Santiago Diarn says, I hope he comes to UGA, but I'll have to deal with the disappointment better if he doesn't. Yeah, listen, hopefully here on this show, and for those of you who've been with us for a little while, we sort of ride the roller coaster in this stuff. The highest of the highs, the lowest of lows, both in terms of on-field wins and recruiting stuff. I mean, trust me, we've come on here and done some shows. Jeff mentioned Demetrius Robertson. Way back in the dark ages of DawgNation Daily, before we were on video, we talked about Robertson, who made his commitment in May around the same time. That was like a year of commitment. That was a 2016 commitment. Made his commitment in May to go be eligible to play that fall. And we talked about that thing every single day for, I guess, about 3 or 4 weeks. And then he ultimately chose Cal. And I was surprised by that. I didn't think that was going to happen. And we came back on the show the next day and we talked about it. We moved on. When we say we are the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, what we mean by that is in the good times and the bad. Day after that Alabama game, we're on here doing DawgNation Daily. We don't run, we don't hide, we don't take days off. Nobody celebrates more after something good happens, and we do the opposite sometimes too. Jeff Galt says, what time is Owen making his decision? Our SEC coverage is going to start at 5:30. If I had to guess, Pappoe is probably around 6:30. Hannah, what do you think? About 6:30 for Pappoe? I would say about 6:30, but be there early so you can be ready to go for it. Brian Mills says Pappoe would be hands and above alpha dog at Auburn. Yeah, I mean, listen, Auburn does not have a player on its roster right now of the magnitude of Owen Pappoe. And I'm a guy that gets accused by y'all all the time of being an Auburn lover. Some of y'all think I talk way too much about Auburn on SEC Country Live, and as a person that thinks they can be a top 10 team this year, I'm going to tell you right now that they don't have a Pappoe on their roster. I mean, they just don't have those kind of guys. I mean, it is not my deal to start, getting in here and saying bad things about recruits, but look at Auburn's roster. In the last 2 recruiting cycles, since Georgia missed on Derek Brown for 2016, how many guys has Auburn gotten that Georgia either wanted at the time or would want now? I mean, I think that sort of speaks for itself. Let me scroll up here some more. Antonio Dunn mentioning that Tyson Campbell's gotten really good coaching at high school from former NFL types. That's really true. It's really true. That helps him. It's just like those Pace Academy kids who've been coached up by former NFL guys. And, You got Terrence Edwards working as a community coach there and things like that. And by the way, I sort of get into this sometimes with people. That if you're not an early enrollee, but you went to a really good high school, I can almost sort of take one with the other. That's not such a big deal to me. I like early enrollees. I think early enrollees come in ready to play. But if you're Andrew Thomas or Jamari Salyer or Trey Blunt, you came from a great institution like Pace Academy, you're going to come in, you're going to be just fine. You'll be ready to go in the summer. If you're Tyson Campbell and you got great coaching at American Heritage, which is sort of a Pace Academy of South Florida, then you're going to come in just fine, be ready to go. Especially when you're competing in these like Florida track events against guys like Anthony Schwartz and people like that. I mean, he ain't sitting at the beach and eating chocolate chip cookies all day long. I mean, he's getting after it. So I think he's gonna be ready to go. Let me pop over to YouTube for a moment. Boy, there are a lot of good comments today. I wish we had time to sit here and talk about them all day long. But Diedrich Frazier says, and this is a great conclusion, we need guys like Owen Pappoe to beat Alabama. That's Diedrich Frazier on YouTube. That's 100% right. Y'all, I don't want to give Alabama credit for anything. I'm so sick and tired of Alabama, can't stand it. But as I said a moment ago, they had 12 guys drafted in the most recent NFL draft, and they are still 2-1 to win this year's national championship. That is a lot of talent on one roster. So the reason why you need a Quay Walker and a Channing Tindall and a Tresman Marshall and an Owen Pappoe, you need like 4 guys who essentially do the same thing, is because that's kind of what Alabama has. That the most frustrating thing in the world for a Georgia fan right now is that not only is this program recruiting better than it's ever recruited before, it's virtually recruiting better than almost anyone has ever recruited before. Getting far more than its fair share of elite players, but it needs every single one of them because Alabama's been doing sort of the same thing for a while. I agree with what Marcus Spears said on the SEC Network. This battle between Georgia and Alabama is just beginning. It's going to have a lot of wars, a lot of rounds of competition over the course of the next few years. But Georgia needs 5-star players to win it, and Pappoe is one of those. I'm guessing good news tonight. We'll find out on SEC Country on the Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter feed. We'll come back and talk about it. Good news or bad tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. If you missed a portion of our broadcast, including the great interview with Jeff Sentell as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, check out the audio version. We'll post the podcast virtually immediately right here on all the ways that you find podcasts. And then see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live, presented by Marco's Pizza.